Today in synagogues in Jewish communities around the states, it's being marked as what's called Repro Shabbat. It's a time to consider reproductive justice. And with the announcement this week that Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyers will be stepping down from the bench, the topic is once again top of mind. As I'm sure you know, in recent years, we've seen changes in the composition of the court that make it likely that access to abortion will be restricted or perhaps outlawed altogether. This has effectively already happened in Texas, and last year state legislatures across the land passed a record number of laws, 100 laws, restricting access to abortion. Now, I'm not an expert, of course, in the intricacies of American law, but I'd like to share a perspective from Jewish law. In sharing this teaching, I recognize that this topic is sensitive and personal to many. I also recognize that some people might consider really this whole enterprise fraught with challenges. How do you turn to this ancient precedent developed by men establishing halakha that primarily impacts women? It's a valid point. At the same time, though, I believe in the timelessness of the Torah and believe that we will see the great sensitivity with which those very rabbis addressed this topic. Now, the reason this particular topic was chosen for this Shabbat is because it's from this morning's Torah reading that the laws and perspectives in Judaism are found on abortion. At the beginning of Parshat Mishpatim, we read a story about two men who were fighting, and in the course of which they accidentally bumped into a woman who was pregnant, causing her to miscarry. The description of pregnancy loss and the ensuing punishment of those men are the starting point for our tradition's investigation into our thoughts around abortion. Without going into detail, it's noteworthy that early Christian tradition understood this passage very differently, and those differences led to fundamentally different perspectives on this topic down to our own day. We've studied that passage and unpacked it in previous years, and so today I want to turn to a different part of our parsha. It's a verse that might not otherwise be noticed or considered in relation to this topic, but one that I believe has significance. At this point in our story, the Israelites, they've experienced slavery and they've witnessed the plagues. They've escaped Egyptian bondage and walked to Mount Sinai. And as they dream of making their way to the promised land, God offers them reassurance. God says, "I'll be with you on your journey." As we read, "I, the Lord your God, will bless your bread and your water. I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman shall miscarry or be barren, and you will enjoy the fullness of your days." After promising the Israelites prosperity, God promises them health. And we read that verse that God says, "I promise no women will miscarry or be barren." Just as the land would be fruitful, so would the women. Just as Israelite society would be healthy, so would women be healthy enough to bear children. Now, clearly, these areas are directly related. The medieval commentator, the Tur, noted that having access to plentiful crops, to clean water, being able to combat disease are essential for a woman's pregnancy. In this passage, we see the combination of pregnancy loss and barrenness. And we know from stories both from the Torah and from our own time that those who face pregnancy loss, who suffer from infertility, that these events leave deep emotional scars. The same was true, if not more so, in biblical times. In pre-modern agrarian societies, when child rearing was essential for a family's livelihood, as well as a woman's social standing and emotional well-being, the issues, I think, were only amplified. But today I want to suggest that we look at these verses from a different perspective. In the Torah, the reference to healing from sickness goes hand in hand with avoiding miscarriage and curing infertility. To be healthy is to be able to bear and raise children. But in some cases, just the opposite is true. The way to ensure one's health and the health of one's family is not to have children, including to terminate a pregnancy. That's true, of course, on at least two levels, when it comes to literally saving the life of a mother, as well as ensuring her emotional well-being. This is what I mean. Already 2,000 years ago, the rabbis of our tradition understood that there were certain situations in which continuing a pregnancy might be injurious to the mother. We read in the Mishnah, if a woman is having trouble giving birth, they abort the fetus because the mother's life comes before the life of the fetus. Chayeha kodmim lechayav. Now, the reason that the rabbis could come to this conclusion is because they were not weighing two equal lives. In Jewish law, the fetus is not considered a life with an independent status, with inalienable rights. It doesn't gain that status until birth. As Rashi succinctly put it, lav nefeshu, it is not a life, it's a life in formation. We can appreciate this conclusion from another example. If you picture in your mind a woman who's pregnant who wants to convert to Judaism. When she converts and then has the child, what is the status of that child? The child is Jewish. She converted beforehand. If you were to say that these were two independent lives, then that child would have to undergo a separate conversion after the birth. In the case when a pregnancy imperils a woman's life, Jewish law not only permits, but actually requires an abortion. But the relationship between health and pregnancy goes beyond rare disorders such as preeclampsia. It includes issues of mental health. Now, that's just not a modern interpretation of law. The leading 17th century German Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote quite explicitly, saying, even if the mother's life is not in danger, but only to save her from woe, he said, that would cause her great pain, even so would abortion be permitted. Mental anguish, tsa'ar, domestic tranquility, shalom bayit, personal dignity, kavod habriot, all carry significant halachic weight when addressing the topic of abortion in Jewish law. I'll note as well that Bethel's own Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Castle Abelson, contributed to this discussion. In 1983, he co-authored a tshuva, an approved legal response for the conservative movement, writing, the Rabbinical Assembly Committee on Jewish Law and Standards takes the view that abortion is justifiable if a continuation of the pregnancy might cause the mother severe physical or psychological harm, or when the fetus is judged by competent medical opinion as severely defective. The fetus is a life in the process of development, and the decision to abort should never be taken lightly, he wrote. To be sure, there's much more to say on this topic from the perspective of Jewish law. And as is true with most issues of halakha, there are a range of opinions, and they differ depending on the specific circumstances. For a quick summary of this argument, I invite you to see in your Chumashim, on the bottom of page 461, all of this outlined. My point in sharing this passage from the Parsha that pairs health and pregnancy is to highlight what we know to be fundamentally true, that the impact of carrying an unwanted pregnancy to term, that its impact on women's health is real and significant. Dr. Valerie Peterson is a doctor of family medicine in Dallas. These are her words. At 16 weeks, she said, I had an abortion. My son was diagnosed with a fetal anomaly that made it 100% incompatible with life. I lived in Texas, and the laws at the time prevented me from getting abortion care that I needed at the time and when I wanted it. There was a 3 to 4 week waiting list and a 3 to 4 day process. The laws had such a profound impact, she said, on my mental and emotional health. I ended up traveling to Florida, where I was able to get an abortion done within 48 hours of the diagnosis and was at the clinic for no more than 6 hours. Dr. Peterson had the ability, she had the financial resources to travel to get an abortion. Imagine if she couldn't travel and had to wait, how that would have continued to impact her mental and emotional health. Imagine if the laws had changed and she had to carry the pregnancy to full term, what the impact would be. Unfortunately, such a scenario is not out of the question if so-called pro-life activists succeed in restricting or eliminating abortion access. The Torah teaches us, "Uvacharta b'chayim," to choose life, meaning that as Jews, we are to be pro-life. We choose life by caring for our bodies, that we might live long and healthy lives. We choose life by having or adopting children, or by supporting institutions and policies that support family life. We choose life by prioritizing the life of the mother and by advocating for reproductive justice that guarantees that she has choice. We choose life by looking beyond ourselves to ensure that others have access to good, affordable medical care that addresses mental and physical health. We choose life by focusing our efforts to improve life in the here and now, and not simply waiting for a world to come. In our Parsha, God says, "I will bless your bread and your water. I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman shall miscarry or be barren, and I will fill the number of your days." Et mispar yamecha amalei. May we know prosperity and plenty. May we know health of body and of mind. May the emptiness we sometimes feel deep inside of us be filled with love. Thus may our length of days be filled with life. And let us say, Amen.